What are common mistakes that you see in the search process that relates to the profile?
Bending your profile to fit the person that you happen to love.
Yes.
And it could be an external person that you just fell in love with because you listen to their preaching and you think, oh my word, our church would eat that up. And then you find out they don't have, they couldn't lead themselves out of a paper bag.
Welcome to the LeadingSmart podcast, where we're talking all about pastoral succession. And on today's episode, episode 9, we are talking about building the ideal senior pastor profile. Tim, you and I have written, I don't even know, lots and lots.
Scores, if not hundreds.
Of these senior pastor profiles in our day when we were together at Vanderbloemen and then in both of our work consulting churches. So let's first talk about, at a high level, why is this so important? Why do we need to have this written down and in a profile of what we're looking for in the senior pastor?
Yeah, we talked about this a bit last episode when we were talking about that search or transition team and that this being one of kind of the primary responsibilities of that. And the reason this is especially helpful is obviously you need it regardless, but it's especially helpful if you have internal candidates you're thinking of, because these are people that you love, that you've been in small groups with, that you go to church with, you've heard them preach, and you're like, oh man, we'd love them to be our next senior pastor. And then I ask, well, what do you want your next senior pastor? And like, oh, we've never thought about that. It's like, you got to write that down. You got to get that, because otherwise you're going to either be incorrectly filtering someone out or incorrectly asking them to throw their name in the hat. And both of those can be traumatic for an individual. So making sure that and this isn't always a 1-for-1, right? You might have had a founding pastor that's been there for 35 years and, it's Barry, and you're thinking, well, we just need another Barry, someone who can preach. It's like, well, it's a lot more than that.
Yeah.
And instinctively it's a lot more than that. So just having time with a group that's prayerful and thoughtful to think that through and get it in writing.
We were talking about this in a little bit of a different scenario on our drive-in to record this episode today, which is it's tempting, whether we're talking about succession or church staffing structure in general, it's really tempting to think about the people first rather than what is the most effective structure that we need in place in order to support our strategy or our mission.
Yeah.
Because we love the people that are on our team, or, we're thinking of this certain person that we think is a great teacher, but they might not be the right full package leader that we're looking for in order to move our church's mission forward. Yeah,
you often think, just because we're all wired this way, we think of what's most comfortable, what's least disruptive, and you may actually need disruption. You spend some time working on that together. You may actually need someone to disrupt because you haven't been growing as a church, or you're unhealthy or whatever. So taking the time to actually define that, to write it down, to agree on it. And then when you're holding up a candidate next to that, someone that you love, and maybe they've been in your church for a long time, you're like, they actually don't match up with the profile. So we actually should not ask them to throw their name in the hat.
Yeah.
Or if they've already done that, then we should sit down with them and lovingly say, hey, here's why we're not going to pursue you for this.
It's so good. Well, and that leads to kind of my first question about the practicality of the profile. So how do you determine what should be non-negotiable and what is flexible when you're building that profile?
Yeah, that's a good question. And how do you figure that out, or which should they be? That's kind of up to the group and up to the church. So obviously you're going to have some theological distinctives that are going to probably be non-negotiables for you. You may have some theological tenets that aren't non-negotiable, that you're like, you know what, we could go either way on this specific thing that's maybe ancillary to your theology. So how they're wired. So this is probably an overgeneralization, but there's 4 kind of primary wirings or strengths of a senior pastor. Usually all senior pastors have all 4 of these, but often they have one that's pretty strong and they have one that's pretty weak. So one would be just preacher. That's the one you think of first. They have to be a great preacher. So preacher, teacher, communicator, can galvanize a large room would be one. Leader, like someone who may not be a great preacher, but they can lead an organization, they can cast vision, and they can help you get to where you're wanting to go. Third would be shepherd. And a lot of times the church, especially if they've been through some trauma, they just want someone to love us. We just need someone to come in here and love us really well. Fourth one, less common, would be someone who's like a systems-minded administrative person. There's a large church in Toledo, Ohio, it's called Cedar Creek, and it was started by a systems, like he came out of the management, and he was a systems guy that had an evangelistic heart. And systems people usually, when they think of like leading the church, they're thinking of like, okay, how can we build a system for spiritual formation for people to grow? They're not necessarily thinking of like, what's the next sermon I can preach, or what's the thing I can launch or initiate.
Yeah.
So most churches have a sense of like, and I like force them to answer this. Like, if you could only choose one, gun to your head, which is most important? Is it preacher? Is it leader, visionary? Is it the shepherd, person that really loves well? Or is it the administrative leader? And often there'll be one and two that are pretty close. But man, when you define that in and you're like, we're actually looking for a visionary who has some pretty good strengths on teaching, and we can cover everything else with staff. That's great. It just defines it well, and then you know who you're not looking for.
Yeah, exactly. How do you navigate those things that you're looking for in that profile with like the heart of the church? And like to your point, I mean, you just kind of touched on this, right? Where it's like systems person, but evangelistic heart. I'm thinking of someone else who right now that's kind of an executive pastor role who similar, like has a business background and is great, can do operations in their sleep, but is really drawn more towards that ministry side and like outreach and missions. So how do you bring that all together in a profile after you've established like, all right, here's the order of which we want this person to lean on the spectrum of these 4 areas? How do you bring that all together and communicate it in a way that attracts the right person?
Yeah, so get some help to help you do that. I think getting it on paper and then poking holes in it is great. So what I love to do is have a church transition committee, search committee, like put it all on paper and then tell me what's non-negotiable and would be nice. And then I just start poking holes in it. I say, oh, so you're saying if I bring you someone who checks these 6 boxes but not the 7th, you'll be like, get them out of here. I don't want to look at them. I'm like, no, that's not, like we could probably figure out someone to do that. So, okay, so that's not a non-negotiable.
Yeah.
That's would be nice. So it's just really helpful to know what those are ahead of time.
Is there like a number like of non-negotiables? Like, I mean, I know it's not a perfect formula, but should it only be like 3 or can it be 10 for non-negotiables?
I don't know about should be, but the more there are, the harder it will be to find your candidate. I think sometimes non-negotiables, you just poke holes in them and you find out they're not. Like they'll say, man, they can't be less than 35, and my goodness, they can't be more than 50 because we want them to stay for 20 years. And I'll say, so if I bring you someone that has these 32 things that you've said, and they're 51, you're going to be saying, no way. Oh no, we wouldn't say that. It's like, okay, great. It's not a non-negotiable.
Yes.
It's like a target, which is great. It's helpful to know that. A lot of times churches will say, man, we need someone who like culturally, demographically, like they just know our area. So they either grew up here or they live here kind of things. And I would say most cases that's really smart, but I've seen people succeed when they had never been to the area.
Okay, let's talk about common mistakes. So we've built our profile. What are common mistakes that you see in the search process that relates to the profile?
So one would be just not defining it well. One would be bending, which we've already talked about, but the second one would be bending your profile to fit the person that you happen to love.
Yes.
And it could be an external person that you just fell in love with because you listen to their preaching and you think, oh my word, our church would eat that up. And then you find out they don't have, they couldn't lead themselves out of a paper bag, like, okay, they have 0 leadership. And so you're like, wow, that's, you kind of start thinking like, oh, we can do without that. We got, our board can lead. You tend to start compromising. And not that you probably will make some compromises, but you just have to be attuned to that and know that you're doing that. Other common mistakes in searches would be, we referenced this a little bit in a previous episode, but if you're waiting for 100% of the people to be 100% bought in, and I'm not going to say that's a mistake. I'm just going to say it's going to take you a lot longer. Because some churches really believe they must have that in order to select their next pastor. You walk with them for months and sometimes years when they're looking for that person.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I also think that the value that having a clear profile brings, well, I just said, is clarity.
Yeah.
Like making sure that we're all on the same page because it can be so subjective otherwise. And so being able to have a North Star that we can point back to, that both the candidate is acknowledging what they're opting in for
Yeah.
and the transition team is all on the same page about what is most important. So it doesn't become personal where it's
Right.
like, oh, Tim is always a naysayer or Holly just thinks everybody's hung the moon, but it's more about, no, what did we all commit to originally that were those non-negotiables, that were those nice to haves, and the type of leader that we're looking for.
Yeah.
And then it helps you when you do make the decision, the clear communication plan that we talked about was that last episode?
2 episodes ago.
2 episodes ago, making sure that when you're communicating it, this is why we chose this person. It wasn't because we just liked them. It wasn't because they were good looking. It wasn't because they were a great teacher. It was because we were looking for these specific things.
Yeah. Example of that. So worked with a church that had 3 internal candidates. There were 3 people on staff
Which is amazing, by the way.
Yeah, that wanted their name in the hat.
Okay.
And 2 of the 3, the board and the transition team, wanted their name in the hat. So
Got it.
one was kind of like they wouldn't have chosen, but he threw his name in the hat, so they needed to figure that out. So they went through this process of building out the ideal senior pastor profile. And all 3 of those pastors that whose name was in the hat, different people on the board and the search team, they, I like this guy and I like that guy and I hope it's this guy. So, because they love these people. They've been in the church forever. But by the time they did the work on the profile, then they kind of held it was very clear that 2 of those 3 were not qualified. They were not what they were looking for. And so it took all the personal, relational stuff out of it, gave them talking points for when they sat down with them to be able to say, hey, here's why we're actually not going down the road with you for this. And they knew in doing that they might lose these folks because they may want to go be a senior pastor somewhere else, but they were totally comfortable with that because they knew they're not supposed to be our next senior pastor.
Yeah. I've heard you say this before, so I'd love to hear you unpack, but similar to that, it's your new senior pastor may lead differently, and that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Tell us more about that because it can be a scary thing.
Your new lead pastor probably will lead differently. And so that's okay. There's going to be things about him or her that are just completely different from the previous leader. You and I both do some work with Working Genius. We've both been certified. So I'm working with a senior pastor now who he's the retiring senior pastor, and one of his Working Geniuses is tenacity. And the next person that they've selected is not his Working Genius, is not tenacity. It's his working frustration. So that's gonna be very different in how they're gonna lead, what he's gonna notice versus what the other guy noticed or didn't notice, the things that are important to him. It's just gonna be completely different, and it's not right or wrong. And so I think you go through the work of doing the work on who should be the next lead pastor, senior pastor, and then who do they need around them? Because they may need different people or different gift sets around them. Different type, like we know with this one I just referenced, he needs a very strong executive assistant around him who can catch details and can make sure the details stay in front of him because he's just not going to naturally catch them.
So good. I'm so glad you said the Working Genius.
Yeah.
Such a great tool. When you're thinking about profiles, that is something we haven't talked about today. That's a great idea of whether it's Working Genius or another profile, but being able to use an objective profile. And Working Genius is unique in that it's part personality, part productivity tool, but we both really love it because it helps you, and to run the current or outgoing senior pastor and the incoming one so that you can have an objective tool to be able to show what differences might we feel as a board, as a church staff, as an executive team with this different style of leadership. And having that conversation ahead of time rather than that whiplash later is really, really helpful. All right, Tim. Well, let's jump into our segment of the show, which is our rant and raves.
All right.
I have a rant today.
Okay.
And it's actually about churches.
So
I'll find, especially when I was at Vanderbloemen, looking at hundreds of church websites, it felt like, a week. Probably not true, not hundreds, but felt like that. And I would, or here's an example. It'll be like, Oh, what church is it? Oh, Grace Church. I'm like, okay. What Grace Church? Oh, in Pennsylvania. And then you Google Grace Church in Pennsylvania, and there's like 15,
Source
right?
600. Yeah.
And so, anyway, when you cannot find the church address easily on the church website.
Yeah.
And so I would encourage all of you, if you're listening, like go to your church website and imagine that you have never been to your church before. How easy is it to find where you're located? Because that should be like the number one thing people are going to your website for, is probably to figure out how to visit you. So that makes me really ragey when I cannot easily find the address.
Yeah. Is it under About Us? Is it under Visiting Soon? Is it under Contact Us? Like, where do you find it?
Yeah, at the very bottom.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I'm going to continue a rave.
Okay.
I kind of introduced it in a recent episode, but let's talk about Chicago's the best big city on the planet. All right, do you agree
Except
with
for
me?
in the winter.
Okay,
Oh, oh.
do you agree with me?
That's a good question. I mean, I think New York City, but I mean, like, because, I lived
You lived
there, I
there.
went to school
Yeah.
there. But I will say, in our marriage, it's our favorite big city.
Okay.
Because it's like, I get my big city fix, and Elliot doesn't love New York City. And so but he loves Chicago.
Yeah.
So it's like our favorite city.
So a few of the reasons. Coolest neighborhoods, just very unique, ethnically diverse neighborhoods, green space. Like Chicago had an opportunity like not many cities to basically completely rebuild in like 1870s because of the Chicago fire. So master planned these green space. I think there's like 19 or 25 miles of green space along Lake Michigan instead of just having, buildings and commercial right up next to the lake. Lake Michigan, let's talk about that. It's like an ocean, right?
Beautiful. Yes.
Yeah.
There, if you haven't been, there's literally sand. Like it feels like you're at the beach.
Feels like, and you can't see
you
across
see
it.
the
You got
skyline behind you.
big waves.
Yeah. And then you're in sand and there's water. It's wild.
Millennium Park, River North, West Loop, probably my favorite part of Chicago. The Cubs. I mean, come on. Just lots
The
of
food. That's why Elliot and I we're foodies. Well, really, Elliot and I just kind of tag along.
Yeah.
But we love the food.
The transit system, I mean, which Houston, when we lived there, didn't have.
No, it's
But
terrible.
amazing transit system where, we live an hour and 15 minutes outside of the city, can hop on a train 6 minutes from our house, be in the city and enjoy nightlife and come home. And
Yeah. It's also great that it's centrally located. That's the thing about like, if you're in New York or you're in LA or San Francisco, you're so far on the coast, like you are on the coast. Whereas with Chicago, you're central. You can drive to all over the country from there.
yeah.
Yeah.
Or fly on United Airlines.
Oh, no. On that note, we are going to thank Vanderbilt. We've mentioned them a lot through this series, but they are one of our partners for LeadingSmart, and we're grateful for them for many reasons. That's how I met you, Tim.
It is how we met. Yeah.
I remember your interview at Vanderbilt, and we worked there together for 6 years, serving churches. And but we mentioned they do a compensation survey, and so that's a big part of building this profile when you're talking about compensation. A great resource there. If you don't have internal candidates and you're searching for that person, we highly recommend. And you can't, you can't find them yourself. Reach out to Vanderbilt. They would love to partner with you and making sure that you're finding the right person who God has called to lead your church in the next season. So
yeah, they also do compensation surveys, which we talked about in a previous episode, and culture surveys to help you figure out the health of your staff.
That's right. All right. Last but not least, our season is coming to an end, Tim. Our last episode, season 10, coming up next. We're going to be talking about staffing and structure after succession. I'm really glad we're diving into this because it's something that a lot of people don't think about, but is critical to making sure that we close the loop and finish strong. So tune in for episode 10.
Well, here at LeadingSmart, we are so excited to be working on season 2 of the LeadingSmart podcast. So, Tim, what was your inspiration for doing this series, which we're calling 40 Lessons in 40 Years?
Yeah, sometime over the last year, maybe coming into this year, I just realized I'm coming up on 40 years since I went into full-time ministry in July of 1985. And it's like, man, what have I learned through successes, through mess ups, through, highs and lows? And then what can I pass along? Because it would be selfish to keep all of those learnings just with me.
hmm Well, that's one of my favorite things about working with you is you have such wisdom from literally 40 years, but from being an executive pastor in the trenches to coaching churches and being a strategic advisor on succession planning and culture. I mean, you really do have such a perspective of the global big C church. What are some of the topics that we're going to cover this season as you've been reflective and identified these 40 lessons? Let's share with people a few of what those are going to be.
Yeah, we're going to talk a lot about uh, just family, like doing ministry with family and making both of them work. Because we all see the headlines and we see people that derail one or the other. Like they either have to pull out of ministry because they're sacrificing their family, or they sacrifice their family, don't know it, and they give just too much to the ministry versus like this actually can work for both. In fact, we're going to have some fun bonus episodes. My wife has
Mhm.
agreed to have you interview us, and we're gonna talk just about what was it like to raise a family and to work on a marriage in the context of ministry. And all four of my children, adult kids now, age 25 to 32, have said, "Hey, let's get on a Zoom and let's have kind of a six-way conversation about what it was like growing up in a pastor's home."
Yes, I can't wait to interview you in faith and then hear those bonus episodes. You have a couple others out there too that we won't
Yeah.
spoil for everybody.
I'm actually excited. I'll spoil one. I'm actually
Okay.
excited about this because I've got a yes from them now. That I'm calling them the Granger OG. So this is our lead team from late 90s in the 2000s. So 20 plus years ago, from Granger Community Church, and our senior leadership team that was at the helm when we had 18 years of just solid, steady growth. And we're going to talk about some of the highs and lows of that. And I think really unpack it in a authentic, compelling, and probably humorous way is my guess.
I can't wait to hear that one. Well, make sure you go to leadingsmart.com/podcast to stay updated and follow us or subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast, whether that's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, other places I'm sure that I don't even know about. So make sure you follow us to stay updated for when we drop season 2 of the Leading Smart podcast, 40 Lessons in 40 Years with Tim Stevens.